Welcome to the first seminar of this semester. We'd like to have Dr. Nilanjan Sahu. Some of you have already heard him yesterday, speaking on a different topic today. Before we begin, I just like to introduce him. Nilanjan Sahu, Dr. Sahu is associated with the Center for Science, Technology and Society, from Habitat Faculty, IISc, Mumbai. His research and teaching includes broadly into environmental policy, governance, analysis of environmental use and politics of interaction between state and environmental over natural resource management. His work has also involved the development and analysis of forestry, tribal development and land use patterns in coastal areas. He is the author of Environmental Jurisprudence and the Supreme Court, Litigation, Interpretation and Implementation, which is published by Orient Lexicon in 2012. He's not a lawyer, but one of the very fundamental books on environmental litigation in India, which all of you should read. It's excellent and analyzes judgment over a period of time, published in the environment. Welcome, Sanjay.
Thank you very much. Let me acknowledge also my gratitude to both Professor Jaiveer Singh and Nupur for agreeing to my this idea to organize this whatever 1 hour, 1.5 hour discussion on forest rights. Though it was not the part of earlier discussion when I agreed to come for this one-day seminar, but since I am here, I thought why not explore this idea. And as the Center for the Study of Law and Governance is one of the pioneering center in terms of advanced research. And when you see Forest Rights Act, even after 10 years, there is hardly any rigorous research work has been done. Whatever we read in different journals or media news reports, broadly they talk about the statistics. The number of titles are given, the number of titles are rejected, but there are a lot to be done beyond those statistics. And in my presentation, I talked about a little bit about the history of Forest Rights Act. At the same time, I will flag some of those issues which if some of you can take for your future research or in the center can think about this. Now broadly, I will be talking about on these 5 aspects. One is the history and the factors that contributed to the evolution of this Forest Rights Act. And then I will talk about the key provisions of this Act and promises that have been made in this Act. And then I will highlight the governance structure, because there is a lot of discussion about the role and importance of Gram Sabha under the Forest Rights Act. And there are so many cases where Gram Sabha has played a very, very important role, and Vedanta case is one such example. But of late you have seen so many cases in different regions, not only in Odisha but Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, where Gram Sabha has played a very, very important role. That we will discuss. And then I will talk about the promise and performance, what was promised in the Act 2006 and where we stand today after 10 years of this policy. And then finally I will talk about the emerging challenges and trends and how those challenges can be sort of addressed both by research groups, by groups which are engaged in advocacy, the groups which are engaged in capacity building. So I will highlight those challenges. Before I get into all those 5 aspects, let me also inform all of you that there are various groups which are working on Forest Rights Act in India, and you have so many networking groups. If you just type FRA groups, you have the groups which are working on individual forest rights, and then groups which are working on community forest rights. So there is a link www.fra.org.in where you will get all the information, especially on community forest rights. And that group is a part of the National Coordination Committee called CFRLA, Community Forest Rights Learning Advocacy Group, which is coordinated by two important NGOs, Kalpavrksha from Pune, led by Ashish Kothari, and Vasundhara from Odisha, led by Giri Rao. So these are the two NGOs which are coordinating at the national level, but there are various groups which are part of this network, including PISS, group in the research subgroup. So there are three groups under this network. One group works on purely research, second group works on advocacy, and third group works on capacity building. And one of the reasons to give this presentation in this center is to bring more people on board to do research work in the field of forest rights, if we can, find suitable whatever broad area of interest in that. So that is the breakdown I wanted to give. Now going back to history and practice, I am sure those who are familiar with forest history in India will be knowing that the most important act from the colonial regime's perspective was enacted in 1927. So when India encountered with the colonial power, as you know, the eminent domain principle was introduced. Both the Land Acquisition Act of 1894 and the Indian Forest Act of 1927. These are the two important legal instruments which were used by the British regime to take over the resources. And that completely shifted the resource management structure, which was before 1757 when colonial power started expanding the jurisdiction. And these two acts allowed the British regime not only to take over the resources but also put conditions how the resources should be used. So for the first time, forests were, all forests, whether you talk about northeast or western Maharashtra or Odisha, all forests were categorized into three types of forests: protected forests, reserve forests, and village forests. Now, under reserve forests and protected forests, no human activities were allowed, and under village forest category, certain human activities were allowed, but with conditions, like to access firewood or for grazing activity or minor forest produce, but they were restricted based on the interests of the British regime as well as the requirement of the local people. So three categories of forests were made under this Forest Rights Act of 1927. So as I said, by this classification, access to resource was restricted and it was completely controlled by the British regime. Until 1927, you had the Revenue Department was in charge of both forest land as well as revenue land. But after this act, a separate department, forest department, was created, and that department till date, continues to sort of act as an independent department than the revenue department. But things, there was this expectation that after independence, these rules and regulations will be amended, or again the forest will be given back to the community, but that didn't happen. In fact, the National Forest Policy of 1952, it reinforced those rules and regulations enacted by the Britishers, and it continued to appropriate resource. Appropriate resource in the sense, the centralization of resource management continued in the post-independence period. And some of the provisions of 1952 forest policy include the following: that forest will remain as a state subject. There should be a target of 33% forest cover, and all forest produce, when I say all forest produce, especially the minor forest produce, were nationalized. That means all selling, ownership, access to resources will be determined by the state. And this National Forest Policy, as you know, the second 5-year plan, the emphasis was given more on heavy industries. And the big dams, power plants, all those projects were introduced. And those projects were possible because of the centralization of policy making process, which allowed the state to divert forest for non-forest purposes. So this continued till 1976. And 1976, when we had emergency, during that period of time, as those who attended yesterday's discussion, the 42nd Amendment was introduced. And that 42nd Amendment brought not only administrative changes, but also with reference to environmental protection new provisions were introduced in the Constitution of India. So Article 48A and Article 51AG were introduced, and the word environment also was incorporated in our Constitution. But at the same time, forest, which was a state subject, was brought under concurrent list, thereby giving both the central and state government to make rules and regulations. But the significant change that happened, which made a huge difference as far as forest diversity is concerned, it was the Indian Forest Conservation Act of 1980. And this is very important, especially provision of the MOA. So that is the impact of this judgment of Gadavavan, who said that irrespective of ownership and classification of forests, no forest can be diverted for non-forest purpose. So it tried to strengthen the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, which only talked about forest cannot be diverted for non-forest purpose. And because of this Gadavavan judgment, all those forest areas where people were living, those which state governments failed to regularize them, the state governments continue to use force to displace them, saying you people are living in forest areas and this forest cannot be given for any purpose, non-forest purpose, including your housing and development purposes. So all the people should be displaced. So many states, and there are several reports, even the tribal departments on the report recognizes how thousands were displaced by using this Gadavavan judgment. And subsequently there was another litigation filed by WWF talking about enforcement of forests by tribals and non-tribals, and this judgment was used to displace people. And because of this displacement of people as well as the judgment by the Supreme Court, and there was also support at the state level to displace these people, and this is what they use this judicial decision. And what I said yesterday, like under the shadow of judicial activism, you try to legitimize your actions. And this is what the government did in many states. They legitimize the decision saying it is not our policy, it is the judicial decision and we have to enforce that decision. But fortunately during this period of time you had one national level organization was formed, Campaign for Survival and Dignity, CSD was formed, which is an association of several NGOs and groups which broadly work for forest rights and governance. And this CSD started campaigning across all the states against those eviction of tribals and other forest dwellers in different states. And it was sometime during this period, the government also changed. Like in 2004, May 2004, the government of India, you find NDA lost election, UPA came to power. And during this period of time when UPA was formed, it was also the period when three new states were created, like Chhattisgarh, then Jharkhand were created in 2000, November 2000. And 2003, elections were held for all these central eastern India states, Odisha, Jharkhand, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and all these states Congress lost power as far as state elections is concerned. And as it happens for every political party, Congress also had their internal committee report, like why we lost election in these states. And one of the reports which Manishankar Iyer and I think Oscar Fernandez, they wrote to the High Command the reasons why Congress failed in all those states, in addition to so many other factors like defection politics, internal conflicts, all those things. One of the reasons they highlighted is the forceful eviction of tribals in these regions, which made the tribal people to change their voting behavior. So they shifted from traditionally they voted for Congress or left parties in those regions, but increasingly they supported. So Odisha, the BJP came to power in alliance with Naveen Patnaik government. So Madhya Pradesh, Uma Bharati, and subsequently now Shivraj Chauhan, Chhattisgarh last 15 years the same government, and then you had also Bihar, earlier Nitish Kumar and BJP. So all these states, the voting behavior of the tribals changed and shifted from Congress to non-Congress parties. And this became also one of the reasons which, when they formed this UPA Common Minimum Program in July 2004, in addition to all those other issues like addressing poverty and infrastructure, science, all those things, there was one important agenda which all the alliance partners agreed to restore the rights of those forcefully evicted tribals and non-tribals in different states. And it was during this period the role played by NSC, National Advisory Council, which was very important at that point of time, and NSC played a kind of very important role in facilitating between CSD, Campaign for Survival and Dignity, and the government of India. So NSC also brought a kind of report about the forest rights of people in different states, and that report also supported the argument of campaign for survival and dignity. And this happened because in the political culture, left coming into power in alliance with Congress, and both agreed to bring this policy change. And finally, both governments agreed. Both governments, in the sense the allied partners, and then the Minister of Tribal Affairs was asked to prepare a forest rights bill. It was in 2005, early 2005. But in the beginning, the Minister of Tribal Affairs prepared a bill which was talking only about scheduled tribes forest rights. Okay. Now from January 2005 to December 2005, when the bill was placed in the parliament, a lot of negotiations were going on, like what should be the cut-off date, because earlier the government said the cut-off date should be 1980. Okay. And before this, what happened, I forgot to mention the point, when the election was round the corner in 2004, March, April, the NDA government issued a guideline saying all those forest dwellers' rights should be regularized, and the cut-off date was increased from 1980 to 1993. But Supreme Court gave a stay order to that circular, saying it is violating the government judgment, and those people cannot be regularized in those forest areas because forest lands cannot be diverted for non-forest work. Okay. But when this shift happened from NDA to UPA, and the UPA decided to bring a separate statutory act to recognize those rights and of people. But MOTA in the beginning was under the impression, when you talk about forest rights, forest area, only tribal people are living. Okay. And in between, negotiation happened, the campaign for survival dignity, the left party, and they formed a committee, joint parliamentary committee was formed, where representation from different parties attended the meeting. So in between, what happened, when the bill was drafted, there was a lot of public outrage, especially from the conservationist groups in the country, the conservation biologists, the NGOs like IUCN, NGOs like WWF, they all protested, like how can you divert forests and give such huge forest area to forest dwellers? What will happen to wildlife animals? So within Congress also you have, within that UPA, so many Congress MPs lobbied in the parliament not to bring this act. Like, especially those MPs from different political parties who come from those feudal societies. Earlier there were rulers, there were kings who loved to hunt animals till Wildlife Protection Act was enacted. And they felt if we are not able to use forests, not able to hunt animals, nobody should be allowed to also enter into the forest. So they emphasized Wildlife Protection Act should be implemented and Forest Rights Act should not be brought into place because it is violating the provisions of Wildlife Protection Act, which clearly outlines that no human activity should be allowed in wildlife areas. But somehow the lobby of left as well as other Congress leaders worked effectively, and then finally the bill was sort of placed in the parliament. And when the bill was placed in the parliament, there was a lot of also opposition, as I said, not only from Congress, other conservative lobbies, and then finally it was given to JPC, Joint Parliamentary Committee was formed, and Joint Parliamentary Committee gave its recommendations in May 2006. Now this is very important aspect to discuss. When JPC was given this task to review the first draft of the tribal bill, JPC made so many changes, and there is an interesting paper by M. Rajsekhar who documented all those internal dialogues, discussions. Some 128 changes were made from the first draft to this draft, and the most important change that took place, in fact, that really helped also to a great extent, that the bill should not be called only Scheduled Tribes Bill. Okay? And then it was changed, and the JPC committee said it should be called as Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Forest Rights Act. So that means whether you are tribal, non-tribal, all are eligible under this Forest Rights Act. So this happened in 2006, And then JPC committee said you include other communities, whether you are SC, ST, Brahmin, whosoever, but if you are living in forest, you all are entitled to get this right under the Forest Rights Act of 2006. And then finally this bill was passed. It was passed on 18th December 2006, and in this coming December, this is going to complete 10 years of the Forest Rights Act. I will discuss what are those changes that happened over the years. Now, when this act was enacted, as I said, this is called now not Scheduled Tribes Forest Rights Act. It is called Scheduled Tribes and Other Traditional Forest Dwellers Recognized Act 2006. And then rights are recognized and given legal status. And this is very important point here. If you remember what I started, the Indian Forest Act of 1927, it talked about village forest. Okay. Now village forest, when people were allowed to use those resources like your minor forest produce, then firewood or other basic requirements, those were not legal rights. They were allowed based on conditions, and that remained as a kind of privilege of the community living in and around the village forests. Okay. But 2006 Act for the first time recognized legal rights of people over those resources. So privilege to legal right. That was a major shift in 2006 that took place under this Act. And then, though we don't have time to discuss about the PESA, but those who are familiar, the Panchayat extension in scheduled areas of 1996, which was enacted in 1996, and it recognized the importance of Gram Sabha with reference to minor forest produce. But the Forest Rights Act is not trying to replace PESA, rather it's trying to supplement the PESA policies and programs. And in fact, both these instruments, PESA and FRA, are important instruments to strengthen the local governance vis-a-vis resource management. And then finally, the Act started implementing in January 2008, and when the Act was about to be implemented, so many PILs were filed. And recently, the UNDP has come out with a compendium of all forest rights related PILs. And you will be surprised, around 500 PILs across all the states, in one way or other way, are related to Forest Rights Act. And if you see the background of these people who filed, around 80% of them are retired forest officers. Okay. And the other NGOs you find who filed, they are the conservation NGOs like WWF, BNHS in Bombay, Bombay Natural History Society, then there is Wildlife Center, they also filed. But one good thing happened, which I don't know in the future about these PIs. In all these cases, Supreme Court, even the High Courts, have maintained a kind of very, very consistent approach. They have not given any order so far, but they have also not allowed these petitions to be heard in the Bombay High Court or Supreme Court. So there is a kind of stay order all on these PIs, and how these PIs are going to sort of come as an outcome. Whether tomorrow there will be some judges who will see why Gadhavan judgment has not been implemented. It should be implemented, and given the current sort of political scenario in terms of when they want to dilute forests and other rules, they will see that as that legal decision by the judiciary again kind of using against those communities. There are possibilities, but good thing nothing has been told by the court, whether it was Bombay High Court or Supreme Court. They said there is nothing wrong in implementing FRA, and when other states are implementing, why there is problem in Maharashtra or AP and Tamil Nadu. So that is the one line interim order made by the Supreme Court recently in 2016 February. There was a case filed by one retired forest officer in Tamil Nadu. In fact, Tamil Nadu from 2008 to 2016, not a single title was issued because of the spending this litigation in the Madras High Court. So Madras High Court gave a stay order to the Forest Department not to implement FR in Tamil Nadu. But then the Forest Rights Group appealed to the Supreme Court against that stay order, and they got relief from the Supreme Court saying why there is a problem in Tamil Nadu and other states are implementing FR. So in that way, it's sort of positive, you can say progressive stand that has been taken by the court. Now, so as I said, so many PIs are filed, but fortunately the judiciary has been supporting in one way or other way, and all these PIs challenged the constitutional validity of the Act. And when the challenger said there is already Wildlife Protection Act, there is TN Government judgment. So how can the government of India bring an act which bypasses some of those provisions? Now, given this background, I will talk about the key provisions of FRA which you can read from the Act, but I will just highlight the 3-4 key provisions. As you see from the preamble of the Act, it is not giving new rights. It recognizes your rights which, because of various reasons during colonial and post-independence period, were not recognized by the state. And for the first time, this is one of the acts in the post-independence period where the government recognizes that we have done something injustice to the people. Where the state, if you read this paragraph, where they says the forest rights on ancestral lands and their habitat were not adequately recognized in the consolidation of state forests during the colonial period as well as in independent India, resulting in historical injustice. Okay. And this act aims to address that historical injustice by recognizing those rights. It is not giving new rights as it happened under land reforms, where you give new rights to people, the ownership right, but it is recognizing those rights which were somehow not recognized by the colonial power or the post-independent people. Now broadly there are two types of rights recognized under FRA. One is individual forest rights, that means all households who live, which were there in those forest areas, they are entitled to get forest lands. And there is a limitation for individual forest right. It says each nuclear family is entitled to get 4 hectares of land, that means 10 acres of land every household can get, provided they live in the forest before December 2015. Second, it talks about community forest resource rights. Now, unlike the individual forest right, which is about your cultivated land, which is about your residential area, but community forest resource right, there is no limitation. So, community forest resource rights is for the community, for the Gram Sabha, whereas the individual forest right is for the individual household. Now, under community forest resource rights, there are villages today where you find they have got not 100 or 200, 4,000 acres of land under the community forest rights. And one such example is Mendalekha village in Gadchiroli district of Maharashtra, which is the first in 2009. And that village consists of 100 households, and all households belong to Gond tribe. And they have got 1,800 hectares of forest land. If you multiply 2.5, 1 hectare is 2.5 acre. Then comes to some 4,000 acres of forest land given to 100 households. And I will talk about the implication what happened actually for the Gadchiroli village later. So there is no limitation under community forest rights. Every village today, as per the Government of India reports, 1,73,000 villages in the country are surrounded by forests. And this Act says all the forests which are coming in your revenue boundary, they belong to that particular village. So the Ministry of Tribal Affairs in its own report says there are 1,73,000 villages, and these 73,000 villages have 40 million hectares of forest land. And in this 1,73,000 villages, 150 million people are dependent on forests. Out of that, 90 million people are tribals. So this is what this Act is trying to hand over, those 40 million hectares of land. And obviously when you are going to give 40 million hectares of land, the forest department will not be happy. And that's why all those PIs, litigations, all those things. Because forest is a major revenue source for the department. When you talk about bamboo, timber, minor forest produce. Now all this bamboo, minor forest produce, in this Act, it says all these resources now belong to the company. So as I said, in the post-independence period, all minor forest produce were nationalized in many states. depending on the demand of those minor forest produce. But here it says all those villages are now not only owners, it gives them ownership right, it gives them access to collect those resources. Today you don't need the permission of the forest guard and the range officer to go to the forest in those areas if it is recognized as a community forest resource right. It also gives them user rights, how to use them, okay? And more importantly, dispose of minor forest produce, which is very important. Unlike your agricultural, produce, agricultural produce, what you can go and sell wherever you want to sell. You can sell in your neighboring village, neighboring state, even you can export outside the country. There is sort of no restriction. But forest produce till 2006, even you want to move from one hamlet to other hamlet, you require the permission of the range officer. And this act talks about you don't need any permission today of the forest guard, whether you talk about bamboos, whether you talk about tendupata, honey, whatever you get from the forest, if it is recognized as community forest right. This is exactly the Dachiroli village did, Mendaleka, where in 1 year, in 2009, when the right was given, it's unbelievable. It is all there in the YouTube. You can see the video. There is a video called Ajab Kahani. Dachiroli. So 100 households in 1 year got 96 lakhs by selling bamboos from the forest. 96 lakhs for 100 households. And now Gadchiroli has become a sort of projected as a model village for future community forest rights struggles, movements, so on and so forth. Now every 3 years, like bamboo, it can be harvested in every 3-4 years if you take proper care of the forest. So this is how it is going to empower, and it has already done for some villages because of this important provision under the Forest Right Act. It gives you the power to own, sell, and also to decide where you want to sell. So Gadchiroli village, because of also support from various NGOs like EDRI in Bangalore, Kalpavixio. So every year when the collection season starts, they upload in their website. So these are the forest produce available in our village. This is the minimum tender price, so the tender continues. And then you don't need to sell to the forest department. The contractors from Nagpur, from Chandrapur and Madhya Pradesh, they come and they bid for that online and they get that forest produce. So this is what a paradigm shift happened. Though there are not many villages like Gadchiroli, the process is just started. It will take time. At the same time, this is the right that has been recognized under the community forest rights. And then the third right, which talks about, which is part of community forest rights, it talks about development rights. Now, development rights, again, within the same forest which is given to your village, the village forest community can decide whether they want to have any development activities in the forest area. And these development activities could be of several types. Either you want to have a school or health center or community hall or a marriage hall, whatever, there is a list of development activities that can be taken in a particular village, but there is limitation that you cannot apply for more than 1 hectare of forest land for development activity. So for each development activity, you can have 1 hectare of forest land, and at the same time you should not cut more than 75 trees in that 1 hectare of forest land if you want to use for your schooling or health center. But you can apply independently 1 hectare for all these activities. It's not only 1 hectare for all development. It is for each activity 1 hectare of forest. Now, I'll just quickly run through some of those other rights. It talks about the community rights. Again, how to identify which are the community rights of the village. Every state has its own documents, and it again goes back to the colonial period. You had different land settlement policies. Some states you had Zamindari system, some states the Rohitwari system, some states you had Mahalwari system. And according to those systems, you had different traditional documents. In Maharashtra it is called Nistar Patra, in Odisha it is called Garja Patra. So every state you have different community customary rights are recognized. And these customary rights are now given under the Forest Rights Act of 2006. So every state, they go back to the Nistar Patra, and Nistar Patra like Maharashtra, every state, they try to consolidate this land use pattern in the post-independence period. So it took time in some other states when the separate states were created, but Maharashtra, beginning it started the process of consolidating its land use pattern. And as a result of which today you see those village forests, revenue forests, protected forests, they are separately treated from the revenue lands. Though there is overlapping always in the revenue record, forest land and revenue land, but slowly the process has started, and now many states started computerizing their land use pattern, especially Karnataka and Odisha, which started in 90s and followed by several other states. So the land use pattern, today you don't need to go to your district office to find out your Satbara details, your ownership. Like in Odisha, you just go to, there is a bhulekha.com, you just write the name of the person of that village, you get all the details of ownership rights of the person. Same thing you see now in Maharashtra, all those your Satbara, pattas are scanned and put in the website. So that is what has been done in the post-independence period, but several states are yet to reach that level of computerization of land records. And then another thing this act talks about, you convert all forest villages into revenue villages. Now this is different from what we talked about village forests. So forest villages were set up during the colonial period when Britishers required labor to cut those timbers or bring those timbers from the forest interior areas to the ports or wherever they had those landing sites to export them to other countries, because the railway networking, the transport system developed only in 1850s onwards. The first railway network in Thane to Bombay, 1853, and subsequently other network was set up. But till that period, many laborers from central India or other parts were taken to different interior areas. And unfortunately, in the post-independence period, when resettlement of rights took place, these villages were never made. And as a result of which they remained as forest villages. And when you are part of forest village, then you are not entitled to get all those benefits which revenue village gets. And today you have, if you go to the tribal department, you have 4,200 plus forest villages in the country. Now the forest department is not willing to sort of recognize the rights. Once you recognize, again you have to give all those rights to these people. And Ministry of Tribal Affairs last year issued a guideline that all these forest villages should be converted into revenue villages by January 2017. So in this parliament session, they made a statement like the number of villages which have already been converted from forest to revenue villages. And this is very important because the moment you come under forest village category, you don't get PDS system, you don't get any government facilities, no Manrega, no PDS system, nothing in those forest villages, which is really a very, very serious concern. And unfortunately, the settlement officer who is responsible for all this kind of mess that was created in post-independence, because these villages were located in interior hill areas, and settlement officer failed to reach those villages, and they never brought this issue to the notice of the district collector or to the authority, and thereby these villages remained as forest villages and never got those facilities. So this act recognizes that all those villages are also entitled to those individual forest rights as well as community forest rights. So Madhya Pradesh recently recognized some of these forest villages rights on both community forest resource as well as individual forest resource. And it also says once you recognize, give them patta and titles, and then it also talks about traditional customary rights, but it excludes your hunting and killing of animals. This is where they try to respect that Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. This is going on. Yes. And then these rights are inheritable but not alienable or transferable. You cannot sell those lands. And there is gender dimension is addressed, because when title is given, it should be given to both the wife in the name of husband and wife, if they are married. Otherwise, it can be in the name of whosoever is the owner of that land. And then the cut-off date was 13th December 2005. Now you must be thinking like, why this date 13th December? It's not a very very auspicious day or something like that. The idea was on that day the bill was placed in the parliament and then there was a lot of lobby what should be cut up, but finally they agreed 13 December should be the cut up. That means those who lived in forests before 13 December 2005, they all are entitled to get 4 hectares of individual forest rights and community forest rights as per the Nistar Patra or other traditional documents. Now here, as I said, when you divert forest for non-forest purpose, you are required to pay compensation or what is called net present value of the forest. But under this, you don't require to pay. Government is not required to pay any compensation amount, or state is not required to pay any compensation amount when rights are recognized. So this is the governance structure. Since we have very less time, when you file your claims for individual forest right, it has to go to the Gram Sabha, and then Gram Sabha will approve this, send to sub-division level committee, Tahsildar office, then it will go to district level committee, which will recognize your titles, and the state level committee will just monitor if titles are not distributed and if there is some conflict of interest between the forest department and the tribal department. Now, performance so far, if you see the number of titles so far recognized by 30th June 2016, as of now you have 44 lakhs claims, both IFR and CFR claims, and out of that you see number of titles which are distributed, it comes to around 17 lakh titles, and more titles are issued for individual forest rights and not for community forest rights. So total number of titles disposed of so far is around 38 lakhs, and when I say dispose, it includes recognizing as well as rejecting your claim. And till date you have around comes to around 9 lakh acres of land that has been distributed so far by the government of various states. Now this, if we compare with the land reforms data, I just wanted to bring this comparison. Now land reforms which started in the post-independence period till date, I am talking about the December 2015, if you go to the Rural Development Ministry, there is a land record section, you will get all the information available. So till date what we have succeeded by distributing 5 million acres of land, that comes to 50 lakh acres of land, by what enacting more than 122 legislations were enacted in the post-independence period to give these land rights to people in different states. Whereas you have one act, the Forest Rights Act, which is talking about giving 40 million forest rights land to 150 million people. So this is sort of, see the importance of the Forest Rights Act. Even the groups which were involved in both for land reforms and Forest Rights Act will see the contrast, how effective it is going to be if Forest Rights Act is implemented. Now, as I've already told, the potential of this act is to give 40 million hectares in 1,73,000 villages, but from the performance, as you found, only 1% of that total land has been distributed so far in the last 10 years, and there are serious challenges of implementation because the Ministry of Tribal Affairs sort of completely disowned this responsibility. There is no mechanism how to implement, and you have a lot of tension between the Forest Department and the Tribal Department, and focus is given more on IFR, individual forest rights, not on community forest rights. Because the moment you give community forest rights, you are losing large chunk of your forest, like 4,000 hectares kind of thing. And then you have some states they implemented FRA also in a campaign group. There is an interesting paper documented by Vasundhara and Dabra. When you have election round the corner, the titles go up actually. The distribution of titles in all the states, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, every state you see, the titles have been distributed. In the sense, the titles were given actually doorstep. After title chahiye you take. And this is what happened in all the states. And then come a very interesting report how the title comes down after the election and when election is down the corner. So if there is no coordination, then you have exception like Andhra Pradesh during election time when Y.S.R. Reddy was chief minister. He issued a notice saying that all the school teachers will be given incentive if you help the community to file the claim. So 50 paisa for IFR claim, for CFR claim. This is how was done in some states. And then no implementation of FRA in Northeast states as well as in Uttarakhand. Because Northeast is a state of private forests, the tribal councils already own those forests, so there is a sense why do we need to apply for FRA when we have already those titles under our jurisdiction. And then also there is no clarity, whether it is applicable in 6th schedule or not. Though the Act says it is applicable across all the states except Jammu and Kashmir, unfortunately those 4 states where 6th schedule is applicable, it has not been implemented. So the major challenges now you have, the dilution of the Act has already been started ever since the Act was enacted. Even the government of India was not sure this is how the Act is going to affect their policies and programs. And then you have conflict of interest between the MOTA, Ministry of Tribal Affairs, and MOEF. And every time you see the letters that have been exchanged between the Tribal Affairs and MOEF clearly reflects the conflict of interest. And one case is the Vedanta and POSCO, where one ministry clears, the other ministry sends a letter and then it goes to Supreme Court. And then you have a lot of overlapping IFR and CFR cases. So in the same village, when Gram Sabha approves these titles, they are supposed to take out those IFR title areas and then apply for CFR titles. So many villages, the same land is applied for IFR and CFR title. And now when people go to those IFR lands, start their cultivation or other activities, then they are opposed by other Gram Sabha members saying these are recognized under CFR. Okay. And then you have state agencies where you see the DLC, district level committee, which is supposed to give and recognize these rights. They have no idea about the process, and there is no accountability is fixed. Then you have there are cases like in Maharashtra where we are working, titles are issued with conditions. The Act says no conditions applicable. But when I say conditions, they have specified, okay, this compartment number say 56 should be used only for grazing activity because the Nistar Patra of 1920 talks about that compartment as grazing activity. But over the last 100 years, that land use pattern has changed in many areas. Some forest area has become a grazing land, some grazing land has become a dense forest. Now the community is asked to need to follow whatever it was in Nistar Patra, which is sort of against the Gram Sabha decision. And then it is implemented in a campaign mode. Campaign mode in the sense the state governments are no doubt taking interest in some cases, but it is confined during the election period. Okay. And then you have cases in Maharashtra, Odisha where titles are issued then withdrawn. So what happened in some of the villages in Maharashtra where titles were issued in the name of Gram Panchayat. The rule says they should be issued in the name of Gram Sabha. Now, for the last 1.5 years, there are 10 villages in Gondia district of Maharashtra where we are working. They were issued titles before the election, and the process says Gram Sabha should apply. But no Gram Sabha applied, nothing, titles were given to the Panchayat directly. And then after the election, they realized it is sort of not as per the process, titles were taken back, and now 1.5 years, the titles have never been returned to those people. And new claims and encroachments because there is no deadline for your submission of claims. So as a result of which, what happens when people come to know that 4 hectares of land will be given provided if you prove before December 2005 you lived in the forest. Now this will be taken by the Gram Sabha. So very often you know how local dynamics also work at the village level. No doubt it talks about the Gram Sabha and community, but at the same time, as you all might be knowing, the Gram Sabha and communities also, they are not sacrosanct institutions. You have so many village level dynamics, and there are many cases we have seen in Maharashtra where community members, if they are from Shiv Sena, then claims submitted by NCPs are rejected. The same thing happens in other things when community members are dominated by NCP or Congress, then other claims are rejected. And there is no mechanism created by the Tribal Affairs Department to sort out those conflicts which happen at the village level. They can appeal to the district level authority, appellate authority, but not a single village you find where appeal has reached to the district level authority. So this is how the local dynamics, most of these committees are again dominated by the local landlords or the elites or the upper class or caste people, and thereby the new encroachment started. And this, when it was brought to the notice of tribal department, now they started using satellite image, whether this land was really used before December 2005 occupied or not. So you can see the 10 years of land use pattern, as a result of which many titles which were issued during the election time, now they were taken back because at that point of time it was showing in the satellite image, it was a forest area. There was no cultivation, no hamlet, but now somebody goes and applies that I was living in that area, now giving the title. So this is how the land use pattern, so the titles are distributed. And the way forward, it is quite open to many comments or all those things. No doubt the Ministry of Tribal Affairs needs to own the responsibility because it is the nodal agency for the implementation. And also Forest Department in many ways create this conflict of interest between JFM and CFM. And Forest Department doesn't want to lose this concept of JFM which is promoted because JFM allows the Forest Department to control the committee at the village level, whereas CFM doesn't allow any role for the Forest Department. It gives exclusive power to the Gram Sabha. So with this I will stop and I will flag some of the issues if you are interested for future research. Based on our work, we see there is a lot of potential, especially those who are interested. Broad issue could be like looking into forest governance in the post-FRA phase, but you have also some of the legal instruments. Like PESA is going to complete 20 years, 1960 to 2016, and FRA is going to complete 10 years. But these two legal instruments which are very, very important as far as local governance of a resource is concerned, unfortunately all those 9 states where PESA is applicable is not effectively implemented, and also same thing now in the FRA. And another possible area could be looking into NTFP, non-timber forest produce and livelihood. Because as I said, for agricultural produce, you have various policies and programs. When there is drought or some natural disaster, the farmers get compensation for that. But for minor forest produce, there is no such policy. Okay. Now, Odisha is the first state to bring a minimum support price for minor forest produce in 2014. And last 2 years, results are quite encouraging. The livelihood has increased in some of those villages where state has stepped in and supported, because now NTFP is owned by the community. So that is another area one can look into. And obviously gender is very important, gender and forest resource rights. And then the revisiting common property resource, those who are familiar with Eller Ostrom literature, what he talked about, CPR will work or effective when you have all those conditions. But now a new condition has come into picture, that is the legal sanction for those CPR. So how legal sanction helps or improves CPR, that is another area one can explore. And then you have the afforestation program like in recognized FR area, because most of the afforestation programs are now carried out under the supervision of Forest Department. Okay. And what you see, the CAG report of 2013 talks about how they are ineffective. Then you have also conflict and interface of policy, JFM and FRA. And then you have FRA in some of the states, Northeast and Uttarakhand, one is interested. And the last, if you think wildlife conservation, because there is huge lobby from wildlife conservationist groups that FRA should not be allowed in those wildlife areas. But this act recognizes that community members also can play an important role as far as biodiversity, wildlife protection is concerned. There are examples, especially the Saliga tribes in Karnataka, in their involvement, in fact, contributed to the tiger conservation in that particular area. I'll stop here, and sorry for taking a lot of time. There are so many issues and I was not sure which one to leave and which one to go.
Thank you very much, Jitendra. I think it's for all those who attended, it's been an excellent session where we got a very good overview of the Forest Rights Act and also, I think it's important to understand that our legislature that actually played a very critical role, in coming up with PISA and then FRA. These two legislations have the possibility of changing the entire, fundamentally the land regulation and forest regulation structures of this country. Potential has not been explored. Okay, I open the session to your questions, comments, and I also request Jeremy to just chair the session.
Since I put my hand on very quickly there are access. Thank you so much for an extremely rich presentation. I am going to just, I don't even know if you can respond this, well, more like a comment rather than a question. One of the things that I think, which comes out of this Indian experience is also, I think maybe we should also think as a research part of it, to also do some comparative law with other parts of the world where, and this is a very, the preamble was particularly interesting because this is a one place where you are consciously trying to undo a perceived historical wrong. And in Latin America, in a similar sort of a way, there is that. So I don't know that conversation could be of interest, mutual interest in English. The second thing I quickly want to say is what I find personally very fascinating is the exercise of titling. And I think that is probably also another area of much more research which I would in fact be very interested in. And I was wondering, like this computerization, you are choosing a very complex legal pluralists and all that say, how are these people translating it at that computerized level? And is there a good deal of computerization of not the regular land records, but these kinds of forest records? So that's my question. I think maybe we, given the possibility of time, maybe take a couple of questions. Yes, please.
Thank you for your presentation. I come from the Center for Studies in Science Policy, and we are basically dealing with technology foresight scenario planning. So it is one of the reasons I quit my job as an engineer and tried to go with these things, where I was responsible for submergence of one of the cities in Madhya Pradesh, So, would like to share with you something that how it goes like a game of chess, where corporates plan in advance.
And you come here and you can't really come and speak.
Yeah.
Use the mic because we can't.
Yeah. So, what corporates plan? If suppose supposedly, if you want to build a dam, okay. So your major objective is here. The final objective is making a dam. And what they try to criminalize other NGOs and all these things, that we have to put lots of pressure, and they visualize all kind of possible protests, all kind of possible actions, like a scheme of chess. They know what they are going to do in advance. Suppose it will take 10 years to make a dam. They know it very well. How these NGOs and everyone will be active. How they have to lobby the government. So my question is, do we have these kind of perspective plans with NGO also? Like we are defensive now. We have to be offensive. Offensive with the offenders. I'm not telling them become offensive by nature. But since they are offensive, they are planning in advance, we have to. Because once the dam is built, so we don't have to do anything. The city is already submerged. So this is my question.
There was a question.
I have a very basic question
Yeah,
to
please.
ask. Once these claims are recognized by the state authorities, who is in charge, who is responsible for the security of these areas then? Like earlier, it's the forest authorities. Now, what's the case? Once these rights are recognized.
I'm just curious to know if there is a tenure for individual forest rights and community forest rights. I have no idea about it. If it is.
For how many years?
Yeah.
One more question.
So one
Yeah, no, just like he was saying. And then we'll have a second
Second
round.
round, yes.
Yeah.
My question is, communities, forest communities, I think don't remain the same as they have been pictured like for long. Because I come from one of those communities in my forest, in the state of Chhattisgarh. So I find that they do not remain the same, and they are not so immune to the system outside, like market system. So slowly the market is getting into their community way of life and that. And additionally, and even their growing population puts additional burden in the ecosystem around them. For example, like how can market actually help or distort the ecosystem they live? For example, they use a lot of woods for bordering their bagan, what you call, and then they use a lot of forest. So one of the proposal in one of the conferences was that why not provide them with extra subsidy, some cylinders? Why not provide them with that barbed wire that they can put bagan को घेरा करने के लिए? So what do you think that those funds coming for the greening of forest, greening of land or reforestation, or from the red plus can be diverted towards them, that will simultaneously that will benefit even the communities and at the same time green the land and they will be living around.
My question is, no, I think we'll have a second round if you don't mind. I think he's got too many questions to handle. So we just have a second.
Okay, let me start with the last question. What we talked about the important one, like why those ecosystem programs which are undertaken by the forest department under various policies and programs should not be given to the community. And this is very important. What the civil society group also is trying to engage with the state. The last session of the parliament passed one of the most controversial act called Compensatory Ecosystem Management Planning Authority Act, whereby all those funds which the government of India got under the diversion of forest for non-forest purpose, as per the government record, we have 42,000 crore rupees for plantation activities. Now this money should have been given to the community forest rights groups, because the government's own report says the forest ecosystem programs, the success rate is between 8 to 10%. Because what happens once plantation is done by the forest department, there is nobody to see whether they are sustainable or not. And all these ecosystem programs, they have two broad objectives. One is enhancing biodiversity, second is enhancing the well-being of the local community. Now very often when forest department does plantation, they do plantation of those species which are commercially viable, and not which are important for local subsistence, and there is nobody to monitor those things. So this is what the part of the whole discourse, or how this monies under various, now the government of India committed in the Paris conference in 2015, INDC, India, the National Determined C stands for. Yeah. So there, the government of India said that 3 million hectares of forest land will be planted. But now who will do actually? Now the government says this will be done by private companies, this will be done by JFM committees, but they are not interested to hand over this to forest rights committees, which will benefit from this activity, as well as it will give them some employment opportunities, and also ensure the question of sustainability, because very often plantation once done by the department is not taken care of by the department itself. So that is one. And the tenure thing, there is no tenure assets. It is inheritable, so your next generation will continue to own that land for cultivation or residential purpose, and for also the community forest land, the Gram Sabha owns that land, so there is no way. Now the rights, what happens once these forests are given, who will sort of take care of the forests? So I think this is what the part of the struggle. The struggle is about the ownership rights should be given to the community, and as several studies and research reports have documented how it is going to be more sustainable when you have community resource management. Though one can challenge that thesis, but now under this act it is with the Gram Sabha, because this act not only talks about when big dams, power plants or airports, whatever are coming in those forest areas,
Even industrial colony.
Yeah, so
India is
all-
like a hot cake.
So there are obviously all these challenges, but if you see the last 3-4 years of history of this community, struggles and movements, they have become more assertive, and that is a good sign also. But it is also too early to sort of make a statement, because all those 1,73,000 villages, there are, as I said, 1% only we have achieved in the last 10 years, and there are not many groups and NGOs working in this area. And all those groups which are working in different regions, no doubt they talk about common corporate resource, but the community forest right, unless it is sort of put as an important agenda of various groups, is very difficult to sort of have this challenge addressed. So that is one of the reasons why many states where you get like Chhattisgarh recently what happened, they gave the mining license in a community forest rights area. And the government legitimizes its decisions के वहाँ पे अभी तक कोई apply नहीं किया, that means it is not coming under CFR.
Even they have privatized 25 kilometers of a river stretch.
So this act says there is no time limitation for submitting claims. You can submit claims as and when you come to know there is an act. So NGOs groups responsibility to some extent also to make aware people that there is something like this FRA which recognizes your rights. Once they come to know, then only I think they will be more receptive. And fortunately, as I said in the beginning, the court has been very, very supportive. Like Vedanta case, then you read about the POSCO and some cases in Maharashtra, where the court, even Ajay Dubey cases, the wildlife cases, the court said that when you displace people, you follow the procedures laid down under the FRA. So there are some interesting developments. Now, some of these things, yes, very important, the comparative laws. Since I had no time, I could not able to focus on that. Especially Latin American countries and the reports which are coming from China is very encouraging because China also introduced such kind of forest tenure reforms in the post-2003 period. And in fact, they give incentives to communities for protecting trees. And this is also helping them not only claiming at the international level, especially in those climate change conference, how the plantation activities have increased. It is helping them all those carbon sink, all those programs. And for every hectare, they give some $40 to the owner of that area land to protect those trees. So very results are really quite encouraging. And Latin America, of late, they also realized, especially Brazil, because Brazil was one of the few countries in the world where you had a forest declining act at some point. Because all of Brazil around you had those Amazon forests, and at some point they realized they need also diverting this forest for agricultural, other various government activities. And then post 90s onwards, so many reforms were introduced in Brazil, especially towards forest conservation. Now Brazil also talks about handovering these rights to communities. So there is interesting organization which is working in 57 countries, RRI, Rights and Resource Initiative. If you go to their website, they have recently come out with this interesting document, Who Owns Global Land? Who Owns Global Land? There is a report by RRI which talks about the history of land use pattern, how it shifted from state to community in those countries and how it has been successful because you have created all those incentives, like China you give those incentives, Brazil you also created incentives. So these are some of the interesting developments which will be used for comparative analysis. And the exercising of titles is really very, very complex thing. As I say, the Gram Sabha has been given the power, in fact it is a statutory body under the FRA to recognize or to reject titles. It all depends how Gram Sabha is functioning, how it is effective, how it is democratic. But it again varies from village to village, like it worked in Gachidowli, Gondia because it was a homogeneous village. And collective action becomes more effective if you have the following factors. If there is no internal conflicts, if it is a homogeneous group of people, if the local institutions are not hostile, then your collective action works out. And in some of the villages where the titles have been recognized, it happened because of some of these presence of these factors. But as Professor Jaivar Singh said, it's really, really an important aspect and challenge also for the community how to ensure the titles are given to the intended beneficiaries. So the exercise of titles, the process is really complex. It can create a lot of conflicts within the community. It also can subvert various rights of the community, especially the pastoralists. Because this right also recognizes the nomadic tribes, the pastoralists, which is very difficult to prove. I didn't talk about what are the evidences required. When you submit for your IFR claims, they talk about there are 13 types of evidences. And out of those 13 types of evidences, you can produce at least 2 evidences to get the titles. Minimum 2 evidences required to get the titles. One evidence which is very simple. You need to have oral evidence of the senior citizen of the village that he or she lived in the forest before December 2005, 13 December 2005. So that I think every village senior citizen can give. The other evidence could be your grazing activity. You have your livestock, animal, all those things. When you have grazing activity, if you have got the receipt, because every state you have those grazing activity act. So you pay for your livestock some 5 rupees or 10 rupees. Those receipts also can be used as an evidence. Or if you have some other benefits which you have got from the government of your particular state, say for encroachments. So your name is there in the encroachment list. And that also can be seen as an evidence. Or if you have got some agreement with the forest department like JFM. So JFM was based on an agreement between the department and the government. That agreement also can be shown as an evidence for getting those rights. But now, since the forest department realized they are going to lose this 40 million hectares of land, and many villages people don't have also those evidences. Oral evidence you can get, and people are not used to keep those receipts of grazing income is also not, you pay 50,000-60,000 rupees. You pay only 50 paisa per year the grazing activity, and nobody bothers to keep those receipts. So there are some challenges how to exercise to get the titles, and how to exercise also for various sustainable activities as well as for your own cultivation activities. Because these lands, the government says you cannot mortgage to get loan from the bank for investment in your agricultural land. You cannot mortgage those lands. Now there is movement. If you have given the lands, if there is no other support system, they cannot mortgage, then what is the use of those lands? Where will they get those investments? So I think that is, you were asking me.
I think there was, yeah, please go ahead and ask your question.
My question is, in the recent past, nearly Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh, more or less 30 woodcutters were killed by the police. And at the same time, international think tanks are a bandwagon to abrogate the capital punishment. How our forest acts are compared with to punish the woodcutters or the violators of the forest acts in India?
Yes, other questions. I think there was some, you were asking another question. Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned in the presentation that sometimes the title conferred are conditional and sometimes they are withdrawn, and also that the speed of recognition is not desirable. So is there a role of the poaching and the smuggling network in the speed with which all these conditions, do they have a role to play in this informally?
I think there was another question. Yes.
So why is the forest, why FRA is not a serious issue in northeastern Uttarakhand?
Yeah.
That is my question.
Okay, so yeah, you have to ask the state tribal department, because I will show you I have state-wise data from the tribal affairs department. Uttarakhand, northeast states, not a single title has been claimed or recognized. So if you see all the states, I'll show you. Allow that.
Please.
Oh, there.
There. So you need to access your pen drive.
Right there. So I can
Yeah,
use
so you do it, you can do it from here only.
In fact, I will send this paper which I've written on CFR. Can be circulated. Okay, so this is a paper which essentially is done for the state of Maharashtra, but we have for all the data for all the states. So it is not. This is the state-wise data here. Some of the data. Okay, so I'll show some of the states. So say where you see number of titles. Goa you don't have. You see here Goa. This one. Not a single title. This is the latest information. And here you have Assam, Arunachal Pradesh. Sorry, 0. And you see number of titles. Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh. Number of titles.
In Assam you seem to have.
Assam you have. Assam again, these are IFR titles, not CFR.
Not seen.
Okay. And then you come here, Mizoram, then Manipur, Nagaland, you see no titles are submitted, no titles are issued.
So with regard to some northeast states, is it a question of redundancy in a sense? Because there's some states, for instance, Meghalaya, it has, we already have certain rights in place. The traditional forests, the protected areas, the village lands, all of that, those customary rights and access to the.
Yeah, so one thing is, this is also related to the kind of forest history we had in different regions of India. So Uttarakhand, those who are familiar, the British government introduced this act, One Panchayat Act in 1935, thereby giving all the forests to the Panchayat. And the One Panchayat continues to function till date. And Uttarakhand also, which is a state where you have a long history of forest movement, Tipco movement, all those things. Not a single title you see they fight. So when people were asked why they are not fighting, they said it's already with us. Why to fight for a separate right? So there is that kind of perception is also there. And in those 1,73,000 villages, where you have some 1% of those villages they fight, there are many village people they think it is our forest. Why do we need to fight for a separate title? So that perception is also there among communities. But they need to be oriented with the change that this act is talking about. Privilege to legal right, the restricted right to ownership, use, dispose. So when the Gadchiroli people came to know, now all those neighboring villages, they want to follow the Gadchiroli model because they realize they can use the bamboo for their own livelihood purpose. Okay. So now Northeast also the same, because they do have those tribal councils which are controlling those forests. And it is used by the community based on the rules, regulations laid down by tribal or the village headmen. So they don't see any use of applying for a separate act because they feel it is our forest, so nobody can take from our forest. So why to use this process? But slowly Tripura now, recently we came to know, Tripura, so many titles were filed for development rights. Okay, so you see the latest, I will show you Tripura some, I think they filed. See Tripura here. And this was not the case in 2015. In 2016, you find in Tripura so many, because one of the reasons, even because of the left party's insistence, because it was their sort of role what they played in UPA 1, and when they were criticized that in your home state nothing happened. So one of the reasons now you see the titles which are increasing in Tripura and Kerala also, because of the interest taken by them. So Sikkim also you see And Uttarakhand, as I said, total 182, all are individual titles, no community forest rights. So this is what why FRA in Northeast and Uttarakhand, because the forest history is different in those regions. You have private forest, you have forest managed by the village headman or the panchayat. Now those two questions, somebody asked about, the sandalwood, this mafia and watching. See, it is the Gram Sabha which is now the owner of those forests, and the Gram Sabha has to sort of protect the forest, but at the same time it is not the exclusive domain of the Gram Sabha, because there are other rules and regulations which are applicable for protection of wildlife animals. So this is where the forest department roles also comes into picture. And those who are interested, one point which I could not able to mention, the last NCRB report, National Crime Report, Bureau of India, for the first time in 2014, they have come out with a separate crime record, and that crime record talks about environmental crime in India. In addition to all your murder, road accident, all those things, there is a separate record, and they have documented around some 5,000 environmental crimes that took place in 2014 and 13 and 14, and most of these crimes, around 50% crimes occurred in Rajasthan, in those Alwar district where Sariska National Parks and sanctuaries. Okay? And most of these cases are filed against tribals. Since we don't have time to discuss, but the Wildlife Protection Act talks about penalties for various activities. It includes also when you enter into the forest. Cutting forest is different. Even if you enter also to reserve forest, that is considered as a crime. So it has to be also done by the forest department and the other wildlife agencies which are supposed to implement the Wildlife Protection Act. No doubt the Gram Sabha has to play an important role. The poaching activity, historically it has been sort of framed, it is the local community which is involved. But those who are familiar with Sansar Chand, the man who killed not one or two, 700 tigers in the country. If you Google, you find out Sansar Chand, who was a mafia, the poacher, the big poacher, who was jailed in 1998, 2000. Last year he died in the jail only. And Sansar Chand was involved in all your Sariska, Ranthambore, those tigers which disappeared. And when he was caught in Delhi, some 200 skins they found in his residential place. So the poaching has, is not just the local community is involved, but the role is important to address the question of poaching. But they are not completely responsible or liable to ensure all wildlife animals are protected, because you have not given them incentives. And recently there is huge body of literature which is coming which talks about ecology driven displacement. Now you have so many parks and sanctuaries in the country. In 1936 we had only one national park, Jim Corbett in Nainital. Today you have 683 parks and sanctuaries. And more parks and sanctuaries, more displacement. So why community will take interest when there is no incentive for their rights? So that is what
You mentioned that till now there has been focus on IFRs instead of till now it has the focus has been on IFRs and not on CFR. But in social and cultural hierarchy, which plays a strong role in communities, how can we ensure more focus on CFRs? And because local politics of Gram Sabha is also essential for that. So I don't know, how can we do this strong focus on CFRs in this case?
Right. And this has been a challenge also for people who are engaged. See, IFR, what happens is your immediate interest. You get that land which you have been cultivating for centuries, but somehow it was not never recognized. And the moment you get this IFR, you are not worried about the CFR because you have been using that forest for whatever time period. And now what happens in many villages, people also say, okay, even if we go for CFR, what is the guarantee the benefits will come to us? Okay? So now people, those who are engaged, they use this village case studies like Gadchiroli or Panchgaon in Chandrapur or some districts in Odisha, where all these good practices, have been sort of, done or followed. Now people want to use them as models. So it is the tribal department which for the first time even recognized the Gadchiroli model and encourage people to go for CFR, whereas College department encourages more for IFR. They will lose huge area. And interestingly, they encourage JFM. So JFM, when the guideline was issued in 1990, JFM committee, Joint Forest Conservation Committee, it says the president will be from the village, but the secretary will be the forest department representative. And the benefits of JFM will be shared between the JFM committee and the forest department. And the benefits, the sharing, vary from state to state. Some states 75% for the community, 25% for the department. Some states 50-50%. And some states they said the benefits for minor forest produce but not for the timber. Now under this act, it also gives the right to timber. Okay, so now earlier the demand was minor forest produce. They moved from minor forest produce to right to bamboo in case of the Gadchiroli. Now the communities are saying, since it talks about the management right, and management right includes all resources, so why not timber? So we don't know how it is going to unfold in future when community demands timber is also our right. There will be a lot of protest and resistance from the department, but this is what the act talks about. When PESA gives access to minor forest produce, but PESA doesn't talk about management right. Whereas Forest Rights Act talks about both access to resource as well as management right, which includes your timber. So in that case, SCMR would be important.
Thank you so much. There is tea and samosa outside.
Thank you very much. So I can keep this presentation and this paper which you can submit. And there is also this national convention on CFR is happening in Delhi on 13th and 14th December. I will send that invitation to Professor Jay. You can circulate to students, those who are interested, they can come.